Alrighty. Well, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Ariel Williams, and I am the Training and Education Specialist in the Center for Diversity and Inclusion at Washington University in St. Louis. I am very excited that you all have decided to join us tonight. This is the second edition in our Break the Glass series featuring Kris, the co-owner of Left Bank Books. I am very excited to have her this evening. I believe she has a wonderful presentation prepared for you all. I am going to jump right into her bio and then let her take it away. So, Kris Kleindienst is the co-owner, soon to be sole owner, of the Left Bank Books, where she has worked since 1974. She holds a BA in English and Women's Studies from Washington University, class of '79. She is an award-winning businesswoman, author, and activist. She identifies as a queer femme lesbian. Under her care, Left Bank Books has grown from being a small leftist bookstore to an award-winning, full-line independent bookstore with a mission-based focus on literacy and justice for all. The store has been recognized internationally within its industry for its commitment to social justice through selection, programming, and personal involvement. The store's special commitment to racial justice and LGBTQIA liberation, along with its hybrid business 501c3 model, have served as an inspiration to many independent bookstores across the country. And from here, we have Kris.
Hi, and thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you to the whole Center for Diversity and Inclusion at Washington University. A much needed addition to the campus. It's really great to be invited, and I'm pretty honored. I have to pull this up here, excuse me. When I was asked to do this, I thought about my audience, and I knew it could be a variety of folks, but the ones I really wanted to talk to were students on campus now. So if you aren't a student on campus now, just kind of pretend you are. Think about yourself perhaps as a student, or maybe just wherever you are in your life right now in that context. And I'm going to tell you a story, since I sell stories for a living and stories are important to me. And there'll be time for questions afterwards. So when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, my parents always told me I could be anything I wanted to be. In this way, they were generous and amazing. Anything they said, anything. This was a highly atypical girl child rearing approach for its time. But my mother was an atypical mother. She and her mother had both gone to college. My mother dropped out after 2 years because the Jesuits at Loyola didn't let pregnant women attend school. 15 years and 3 kids later, she returned to finish college at Washington University, walking away with an all but dissertation PhD. She also walked away from my father and into the arms of a woman she met while at WashU. Now remember, this is a time when it was legal to discriminate against women and queer folk, when women couldn't buy a house or hold credit in their own names, when racial segregation was overt and aggressive, when birth control was illegal. Sounds a little familiar, I know, but these were not glass ceilings. They felt more like impenetrable vaults. And yet, my mother went to grad school at one of the most radical sociology departments of its time and built a career. Her accomplishments include coordinating a nationwide effort to ratify the ERA and a stint in the federal government where, among other things, she wrote the first regulations for Title IX. Check here. Okay. All my life, women my age have told me how envious they are that I had a mother like this. She was a rarity, a groundbreaker, a true leader. My grandmother on my father's side divorced her abusive husband in the middle of the Great Depression and ran her own small business as a single mother. Strong women abounded in my family, completely against all odds. It was never in question. I could be anything I wanted to be. By the time I graduated from high school here in St. Louis, my now divorced parents had both moved to the East Coast. My mother left literally the day after I graduated. I was newly out as a lesbian myself. In high school, I had been involved in a student effort to hire more African American faculty and add Black history classes. I was recently woke into feminism by a woman who was a grad student at WashU. I was full of passion and ideals. I wasn't ready to leave my newfound community behind. Still, I needed to have some sort of plan if I was going to remain here on my own. I quickly realized that being told you can be anything you want to be is actually not a roadmap for being anything at all. So this is where I was when I was college age. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I knew I wanted to help change the world for the better, like my mother. I knew I wanted to write something beautiful and important, but I could not connect the dots into a coherent plan, also known as a career path. In fact, a career path seemed a little suspect in the middle of a revolution. I often wonder why we expect 18-year-olds to have this all figured out. So it was 1971, the world was exploding. I was on my own and I was absolutely terrified. Luckily, my dyke pals and I solved the immediate problem of eating and a roof over my head by starting St. Louis's first lesbian collective. It was a way to have a home where we could pool resources and live cheaply while also doing stuff for our emerging lesbian feminist community, a newsletter, coffee house. In the meantime, trying to avoid stereotypical secretarial work, my girlfriend and I drove around looking for jobs in her family's aging VW Bug. One place we applied was a small delivery service, and it sent us away because girls were not strong enough to lift the very small parcels into the delivery van. We returned to the car, which because of its unreliability required that we take turns pushing it while the other one of us popped the clutch to get it started. Now, if you've never done something like this before, the main thing you need to know is that we were pushing the car, taking turns. Eventually, my first proper job out of high school was gas station attendant. I'm pretty sure that my young dykey self striding in there with attitude was why I got the job. They were simply too shocked to say no. Also, even though I was a far cry from a Hooters waitress, there was certainly a novelty factor to having me there. The subplot to this is that all the time I was reading voraciously the books I bought from Left Bank Books. It had opened in the Delmar Loop in 1969. It was started by, yes, WashU grad students and who were activists. I want to stress that these were young folks about the age, well, they were college age. They were college students. Some were grad school students attending classes in many of the same buildings that hopefully folks watching this attend classes whenever the pandemic is over. They felt that the community needed a place to find literature about social justice you couldn't find anywhere else. There was no internet, no print on demand, no social media, no cell phones. So if your local bookstore didn't carry it, you likely weren't ever going to find it on your own. Eventually, after a few completely bizarre stabs at classes through St. Louis Community College, I enrolled at Webster, then college, now university. But because of my vocal feminism, I actually spent 3 years largely steered toward independent study work that focused on feminism and women writers. I thought this was great at first, but it was actually an ingenious design to keep me out of the classrooms where I had quickly developed a reputation for calling out professors on their sexist curriculum. One especially memorable class I did take involved a tenured English professor and published poet who, when faced with the impending visit of a woman poet, felt the need to lecture the class on why there will never be any great women writers. I felt I was wasting my time, so perhaps happily for Webster, I dropped out. It was 1974. I had just turned 21. Again, I needed a job. I applied at Left Bank Books and was hired. Fun fact, I found out years later that I almost didn't get the job because I was a lesbian. I never thought my credentials would be just as controversial at the leftist bookstore as they were at the gas station. Best I can figure, the Marxist leaning of the bookstore's founders was to blame. This brand of Marxism viewed homosexuality as a bourgeois affectation that would wither after the revolution. First day on the job, I did not wither. I didn't know I was supposed to. Instead, I asked where the gay section was. It wasn't hiding, it just wasn't. So I started it. I didn't ask permission, I just corrected what I thought was an oversight. I also took over the women's studies section, which I found to be anemic. I had a few years of independent study under my lesbian flannel shirt by then. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I didn't ever let that stop me. I only knew that Left Bank needed a gay section, and there was no local precedent for this. No other bookstore in the area carried books by gay people until the mid-90s. After a couple of years as a bookseller, I decided I would finish my BA and enrolled at Washington University. I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. WashU threw out my play pretend independent study credits and asked for 3 more years to award me my bachelor's. I kept my day job at Left Bank Books. Meanwhile, by 1977, the store had been sold by the collective to a pair of partners, and run nearly into the ground. Competition in the Del Mar Loop was fierce. So quasi-collectively, the brothers and their 2.5 employees, me, the senior first hired, a man and another woman, both hired after me, decided that to survive, we needed to move to another neighborhood. And so we did. The Central West End became our home and remains so today. It was a good move. Before the year was out, though, the brothers were gone, signing over the somewhat substantial debt to me and my coworker, Barry Liebman. The brothers said they were tired and wanted to go. Barry and I, emboldened by the community support for the store and the sense of mission it gave us, said, we'll take over the store, we'll do this. We had never done this. We didn't know how to do payroll, pay taxes, buy inventory, basically anything but sell books and make change. We actually had no personal money to put into the business, only sweat equity. By all accounts, it was a fool's errand. But what I had was a passion for what the store was and a passion for what it could be. Meanwhile, I was learning how to run a bookstore that had way more debt than equity. I attended classes full-time at Washington University. By 1979, don't worry, I'm not going year by year, I finally earned my bachelor's degree in English with a secondary focus in women's studies in an area which was an area that had barely been recognized by the administration at that point in time. Really wished it would go away, actually. I was now 26 years old, and for what has tallied up to be 42 more years, I continued to keep my day job. I want to let you in on a little secret. It was never my plan to keep my day job. It was never my plan to spend now 47 years and counting running Left Bank Books. It was never my plan because I really didn't know how to make a plan. Told I could be whatever I wanted to be, the choices seemed, well, overwhelming. I was interested in everything. Writers are like that. Bookstore owners are like that. Which isn't to say I wasn't pursuing other passions. I was. I wrote a column for the local gay newspaper for nearly 20 years. Because I decided it was a good idea, I approached a lesbian publisher and I published an anthology of essays. It's called This Is What Lesbian Looks Like, Dyke Activists Take on the 21st Century. And it came out in 1999 and won a Lambda Literary Award. I started various queer organizations with other folks, and I ran track in gay games and won medals. My work in and out of the bookstore was linked. Through this store, I brought in hundreds of authors who spoke to specific aspects of our diverse community. Because I didn't run the risk of being fired for being queer, I could be visible and vocal from my bookstore pulpit. I actually felt that because I couldn't be fired, it was my duty to be visible and vocal. There are so many stories I could tell. Stories about the many queer folk who have thanked us for saving their lives. Stories about being surveilled by the local police because of the store's anti-war activism. The thank you notes we've gotten from people who said the author event they intended changed their lives. Business we've lost for putting up Black Lives Matter yard signs in our windows or taking anti-trans activist J.K. Rowling's books off the shelves. They're still selling them. There are so many stories. When you see your job as being steward to a place that is safe and welcoming, a place where people can lose themselves in books and at the same time find themselves in community, well, a lot can happen. Looking back on my work, I did what I thought needed to be done at any point in time. I didn't fashion a series of plans and goals that would lead inevitably to a lofty apex defined in the world of commerce as success. I encountered plenty of barriers, often financial, sometimes racist, sexist, or homophobic, but I rarely felt that what I was doing was extraordinary. It was just what you did. See something, do something. So I was asked to talk to you under the umbrella of the Breaking Glass Ceilings series. And at first this confused me. I always thought of glass ceilings as a sort of ill-designed atriums in corporate office buildings that are intended to contain and suppress the talent of women and minorities. I could not see how this applied to me. The last time I had applied for a job was 1974. I have never needed to have a resume. I wasn't sure what advice I would have to give about breaking glass ceilings. I felt I had never pursued a career in a male-dominated profession. Right. The insidious thing about glass ceilings is that just because you can't see them doesn't mean you aren't under one. And they are everywhere. And it may seem like a duh observation, but the minute you stop thinking about them is the minute they start to cloud your view. I realize now that from the start, I was pushing against all sorts of glass ceilings. I was told by my parents I could be anything I wanted to be. But I was told by the first place I applied for a job out of high school that I couldn't have it because I was a woman. And come to think about it, I had a part-time job as a secretary in high school at a certain arts organization where I was groped in the elevator by one of the artists. So maybe that's why I preferred pumping gas to typing. Another job that I didn't discuss earlier, I got only because the company had a court order to hire women. And when I went to college, ostensibly to read fiction and learn to write, not only was I told in no uncertain terms that there could never be any great women writers, I actually had to pay to teach literature to myself by myself. And when I finally got into university proper and graduated at the top of my class, Phi Beta Kappa, the much desired degree in English came at a cost. It's not easy to admit this, but I'm talking to you about it because I have a feeling that folks think I have it all together. My amazing, badass scientist Denise even emailed me last night to tell me what a badass I am. So I have this sort of reputation. But I kept that day job, not only because I loved it, but because the deeply masculine, male-identified, male-privileged, sexist English department at that time had succeeded in crushing my dream that I could ever amount to anything as a real writer, a writer of literature. They never said so explicitly. It just dripped out of every lecture like a fog designed to specifically poison the aspirations of young women. It would be some years before I even kept a diary again. I'm proud of my journalism. I'm proud of the book I edited. But my English degree was the first time I really, truly understood that maybe not everyone wanted me to be anything I wanted to be. Now, given this admission, it might seem that the bookstore is a consolation prize. It is not. I can't imagine my life without it. I cannot imagine being a writer of any stripe without it. I'm very proud of what I've done for the community. There were definitely glass ceiling moments. To this day, men will ask me about my now retired business partner who joined the staff 2 years after me and left 12 years ago by inquiring about the guy who founded the bookstore. I know I've been passed over for corporate sales because someone didn't think a woman could handle them. I know I've been turned down for loans and lines of credit because I was a woman. I know I have lost business because I am queer and taken stands on racism. So I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm not going to test you on how many times I said Washington University, but I'm going to leave you with the 3 big things I've learned on the way. First, yes, there are glass ceilings everywhere. Legal loopholes, old boys networks, hard to prove in a court, implicit biases that will leave you wondering, did that just happen? To be a woman, to be queer in this culture, the 2 things I know, among all the other things there are, is to be an exercise in oh for F's sake. To survive, to maybe even thrive, not only is it likely not to be handed to you so far in my time, it might actively be kept from you. Second, chuck exceptionalism. Not everyone is going to be Amanda Gorman or my mom. To think you have to have it all together to fight through those glass ceilings is just another way of discouraging you from even trying. You do not have to have your whole life figured out before you start out. You can be undecided. You can explore. You can go off script. You can change your mind. Define your success by your own terms. If you're the sort of person who can make lists and outlines and set goals, great. But maybe you just don't know for sure. Then set smaller goals. Maybe don't say, I'm going to be a doctor. Say, this semester, I'm going to take a biology class. I'm just now learning how to be consciously intentional myself. Yet somehow, I've lived a productive life that I'm proud of without a roadmap. Lastly, and this is the most important thing I want you to hear, if you remember anything at all from my verbiage today, it should be this. The biggest and most challenging glass ceiling you will ever encounter is the one in your mind. Internalized barriers to your success are the only ones that truly have power. Because if you can't imagine your success, if you think you can't do it, then you will never have a snowball's chance in hell of doing it. Whether it's publishing a book, owning a bookstore, pumping gas, or working on the line at the Chrysler plant, if you don't walk in with the attitude that not only can you do it, but you will do it, you are the first person getting in your way. If you don't want to be the last person getting in your way, you have to approach each and everything you do as if it is the most important thing you will ever do. Writing a book, owning a bookstore, pumping gas, working in a factory. Put your heart into it. Make the work yours. If you are doing it, then it is not beneath you. Work is good. Work is important. If you can't respect yourself in it, you won't respect others who do it either. And that's just messed up. If you do respect yourself in the work you do, you will walk in like you own the place. And if you walk in like you own the place, someday you will. Thanks.
Deep breath. That was awesome, Kris. Thank you so much. So at this time, we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So feel free to either raise your hand and share out loud or share in the chat and I will read it for you.
No, it's like, you can talk about anything. It was a big day. It was a big day in the world. St. Louis got a Black woman mayor, and there was justice in Minneapolis.
Absolutely. This is a very big day. So I don't see any raised hands yet.
I do see a
question. So the question in the chat is, what part does intuition play in your decision making regarding moving forward?
Well, thank you, my dear friend Silver, for asking that question. I think it plays a huge role, actually. And for a lot of my life, I didn't really understand that. But the more I understand it, the easier it gets to listen to myself and make decisions with more certainty and more confidence. Some comments. I think we have a lot of folks in the room right now who are farther along, out of college. I don't know if any of this time period I talked about or any experiences you all may have had, if any of this resonated. I wonder about that.
We have another question in the chat that asks if you ever considered writing fiction.
You know, I think about it all the time. It's like the thing that I secretly, and now not secretly, really want to do. But what I've written mostly has been personal essay, a column in newspaper, and whatever the bookstore needed at any given point. But we shall see, you know. I am trying to focus on that more. I'm in a new place in my life, and why not? Sharon Smith wants to know about my activism. So a little bit more, I guess. I you know, I feel like the bookstore is the core and the place that was it's like my home base for activism. And yet a lot of things I worked on weren't necessarily related to the bookstore. It just kind of gave me the courage in some ways to just keep doing things. And I feel really lucky for that. I think being able to work in a place where you're supported in your identity makes a huge difference. You can take risks, as I mentioned, in ways that some other folks couldn't, especially, and I mean, I know it's changing for queer people a lot, but not enough. I mean, you still sort of can be fired for coming out. So I don't know. As I said, for me, it was, if I saw something, I would do something. And I did the book. I edited the book. I collected the words of lesbian activists who really inspired me, because I felt I saw a need. There were a lot of young lesbians out there and folks who felt they were lesbian but didn't feel accepted in the lesbian community, who were kind of afraid to not exactly come out, but like they didn't feel like they belonged. They didn't feel like activism was a word that applied to their lives. It was something they couldn't do. And so this collection, I really wanted to show that there were a whole lot of ways to be lesbian and activist. And I did feel like I succeeded because I got responses. I got letters from folks who would tell me stories about their lives that they didn't feel like they belonged, and now they did feel like they could take another step towards the life that they wanted. And so I am proud of that. You know, Gay Games started as something wonderful to do. A couple of us, 3 of us actually, went to the first Gay Games years and years ago in the early 80s. And that grew into organizing a group of folks to go. And it might not have seemed that significant as activism, but really it is, because there's so many ways to be an activist. In this case, we weren't lobbying to change laws. We weren't protesting an injustice in front of somewhere. We were actually living our lives in a joyful way. We were being fully realized human beings as gay people. And when we walked into that stadium during opening ceremony, and we were literally cheered by thousands of people as queer people, was incredibly life-changing. So to have something really positive and life-affirming, to experience something like that in the context of a culture that makes you illegal and is dangerous to your life, is a radically, it's a radical thing to do. So I know there's some other things here. Let's see. Talk about how I financed the bookstore. Sure, sure. So as I mentioned, it was sweat equity in the beginning. We didn't really have any money. I borrowed a little money from a friend and paid it back. Barry scraped up a little money. We really didn't have any money. What we had was that passion and that vision. But part of the reason we had that passion and that vision was the support from the community. And maybe what you're referring to, today we have, Kickstarter and GoFundMe. Well, when we started even just to move to where we are now, before I actually was a co-owner, we didn't have enough money to make that move. We had really no resources at all. And I mentioned this to a customer I was waiting on, a rabbi, Steve Blanchard. And he said, well, why don't you just ask people for money? I would give you $100. This was like in 1977. That was a lot of money. And give, not loan. So I took this back to the owners. We made a list and we called a bunch of people, and we raised $5,000 in little like $10 and $20 gifts from people, because they really wanted to see the store stay in their community. It was important to them in ways we hadn't fully realized. So it helped enormously. It was such goodwill. It was an actual resource. We were able to make that move. They were actually able to get more money from the bank at that time, using the donations, the idea that people would donate money to a business as goodwill collateral. I'm not sure how much of that is available from banks anymore, but years later, when we started to have problems with the competition from the big box stores, one of those original people just said to me in passing one day, one of those original donors, is it time for the Friends of Left Bank? And so he just named it, and it's like, it might be. That time we formed our 501c3, our nonprofit arm of the store, and we have used that as a way to access capital that we wouldn't otherwise have to do things that the store does that really are nonprofit. Our event series, for example, our free cultural programming with authors costs money that the sales of books just doesn't pay for. So really grateful. And I guess maybe that's long-winded, but I will say, somebody once said to me, a woman who used to cover the news of feminist bookstores across the country, said that I should do a workshop in tolerating debt, because she felt people were too afraid, that some young feminists gave up too soon. So I excel in tolerating debt, and I can talk to you privately about it if you like. And let's see, what else do we have here? Fears and activism. Confronting fear. My approach with my sun sign in Aries and my moon sign in Leo, and somewhere a rising sign in Aquarius or something, is to basically feel the fear and charge right on through without thinking about it until I get to the other side. And then I freak out. But then it's too late because you did it. And once you've done it, you can build on that confidence that it's possible. You can also realize that you can screw stuff up, and there's, another day. Screw it up, figure out what you did wrong, get up the next day and just do it different.
So I'd like to piggyback on that question about fear and moving forward and kind of going into the unknown. And talked a little bit about your experience with taking this job and then going into the co-ownership, and now you're soon to be the sole owner. Do you have any anxiety around that, and just thinking about it from a business standpoint as well as being an entrepreneur? Can you speak to that?
Sure. Well, it's a little terrifying for sure, because it just is. But what I know is that I've actually been doing this for nearly 5 decades, and there hasn't been anything that hasn't been thrown at us. Big corporate capitalism doesn't want stores like us to be around. This has been the message over and over and over. And, we're still here. Somehow or another, I can keep doing this, whether I'm technically the sole owner or the co-owner. I will just, it will be fine. And yeah, one thing I've said over the years when we hit a low moment and we are freaking out about what are we going to do, is that the most incredible thing about a bookstore is that every day you open the doors and someone comes in and buys a book from you. And as long as you have that someone, maybe you don't have a million someones, but you get a chance every day to start over, get it right. You get a chance every day to do the thing that you're there to do. And as long as you've got that, somehow it's going to be okay. Looking on the screen here. I really appreciate all the kind things people are saying. That's not used to being in the center. I spend most of my time, if I'm in front of a group of people, I'm introducing an author, not myself. I'm not the main part of the program. I'm the Dr. Williams part. I really appreciate this. It's been super wonderful.
I'm very happy to hear that. I am so glad, actually, because my student found you. And as I am going to be new to St. Louis, she found you and told me all the great things that you've been able to accomplish. And I was like, we have to book you for this event. And I'm so glad that you saw value in this opportunity and understanding why we chose you for this particular series. So I'm very excited about that. And it looks like we have one more question in the chat. What is something that you would like to do for the bookstore that has not been done? So looking towards the future.
Oh gosh, that has not been done other than clean the back room. I think I want to build on what we're doing. I think, we've had a program with the St. Louis Public Schools that pretty much had to be frozen because of COVID. And I want to come back and build on that. It's a program that called River City Readers, which we work with St. Louis Public School kids. We had programs in a couple of schools. We were hoping to build more with more resources where these kids get books to keep for their own personal libraries, and they're specially selected. They're not just sort of donations of used books from other households. They're like new books from us with nameplates, with their names, their books, their brand new libraries that they get to keep. And try to work with authors, bringing them in. This is something that we created. It's sometimes been copied. I think that's great because there's a lot of need out there. And this was one small way that we could, I felt like, use what I think of as our embarrassment of riches, which is access to authors and incredibly wonderful new children's books that are culturally relevant and positive and affirming for kids that look like the kids in St. Louis Public Schools. And yet they didn't get those books. They don't get to see those authors because the schools don't have the resources for that. But that was something we could do with what we have, which isn't necessarily money all the time, but we could use the resources of our community, who also, I think, feel frustrated by the limitations and challenges in those schools, but have nothing much they can individually do, and do that. So I think, I hope that we can revive that program in a meaningful way as soon as we can, and just really, I think, continue to build programming. That's the thing that really means a lot to us, is when we can have authors come in and interact with our St. Louis community in real time. So many extraordinary conversations happen that way. And it's such an important way that I think community is built. So that's what I hope for.
Awesome. Well, that looks like that is the end of our questions in the chat. Thank you everyone for participating and attending our Break the Glass series featuring Kris from Left Pink Books. I am very happy for this event to have been successful on such a busy and monumental day, actually. So thank you, Kris, for holding us accountable and keeping us here in this space and giving us some more good in the community. So thank you everyone for attending, and please fill out the attendance link if you can. We greatly appreciate it, and the recording will be made available.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thanks for your good work.
No problem.